Hello. I recently read an excellent new novel which has been getting a lot of attention and which I think might be given that nebulous designation as the great American novel. And of course, there are many books that could and should be grouped in this category that capture something so essential about the American sensibility and the lives of real Americans. And the book is The Emperor of Gladness by Ocean Vuong. And there is so much about this story that I found very emotional and involving, and that really surprised me in the way that I connected to this story so strongly. And I don't think it's a perfect book by any means. I do have some criticisms of it, but overall I found myself completely enveloped in this story and the lives of these seemingly ordinary individuals, and how this novel captures so much about the duality of America, that there is so much that is falseness in America, but then there is authenticity underneath, and there is so much that is ugly about the country, but then there's also so much that is beautiful about that. And we see that played out through the lives of these individual characters and their relationships to each other, and through the whole environment itself in which they inhabit, of this town in Connecticut, in New England. And this story kind of caught me off guard in that everything I'd read about it and descriptions of it, I thought it was all about the relationship between a young man and an older woman and the connection they form with each other. And there is so much in this story about that, but it is also so much about the life of a fast food restaurant, a fictional fast food restaurant that's called Home Market, that is, I think, based off from a real fast food restaurant, but that is in the life of this fast food restaurant, where it purports that every day is Thanksgiving, and this just feels like the perfect embodiment of a kind of American corporate entity that wants to replicate and duplicate this sensation of the joy and happiness that comes with Thanksgiving. And in this fast food restaurant, you can have it every single day, and the central character, Hai, starts working at this restaurant, and it shows his connections with the quirky characters that work at this restaurant, and what Ocean Vuong calls their circumstantial family that builds over a period of time. That these are individuals that Hai wouldn't necessarily want to see on a daily basis and spend so much time with, but he does through working this very labor-intensive job and working so closely with them, that connections and bonds start naturally forming over a period of time, and that these are many people that are very different from him, just as the older woman that he meets and starts living with is very different from him. But at the very beginning of the story, there's a dramatic incident where Hai is standing on a bridge and contemplating suicide when he starts speaking to a woman who's hanging out her laundry called Grazina, and they form this connection with each other and start living with each other because he doesn't have anywhere to live, and because she is experiencing early Alzheimer's. She needs someone to help assist her, but they also need money because neither of them have all that much money, and so he starts working at this fast food restaurant. And so that's how the story develops, and it's mostly following their everyday life. There's not much in this story that's a kind of like driving plot that although there are aspects of it and tension in it, Hai is lying to his mother about where he is and what he's doing, and details of that are related over the course of the story. So there's that tension, but then there's also the tension of Grazina's condition, which is getting progressively worse, and how Hai is able to adapt and try to assist her over time, even though Grazina is estranged from her children, and so they aren't able to help her in her daily life in the way that she needs, and they're kind of living separate lives of their own. So he kind of fills a gap in that way, and the connection they form with each other is really beautiful and tender and lovely and funny and absurd in so many different ways. And this story tackles really big issues to do with depression, to do with drug addiction, because Hai also has a drug addiction, which he is finding it really hard to kick, that he is swept up in this opioid crisis, which and takes over in America, and this is set during the Obama years in America, and so it's when this is really spreading and taking hold of the country, and at a time when there is still so much misunderstanding and shame surrounding this. And so in this way, it reminded me of another recent book, which could be also considered the great American novel of Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, Demon Copperhead, which I loved so much. And in some ways, I think this novel is much more accomplished and well formed in different ways. Kingsolver is a very experienced writer, where Ocean Vuong, this is his second novel, but he's also published a number of poetry collections, and so there is so much in this story which is very poetic. Sometimes I think he gets a bit carried away with his lyricism and his metaphors, which kind of stretch and go a bit too far, but so much of the writing in this novel I think does work and is really moving, especially in the context of which he's writing. And it opens with this scene of focusing in on this town of East Gladness and the landscape of it, and as a kind of like overview of the town in general, but the very name of this town is kind of a lie, because there's Central Gladness, which has been renamed to a different town, but the members of this like section of the community still call it East Gladness, even though that's not technically what it's called before. And that's kind of an example of the pretense and the falseness, and then the reality underneath. But the way that I connected so strongly to this story was in its depiction of the environment of a fast food restaurant, and me as a middle-class American who went to college on a scholarship. I needed to work while studying to support myself, and I worked for a long time at a fast food restaurant at a Burger King, and I spent so much of my time there, and so really recognize this kind of environment of working with a number of different individuals and forming connections with them, of people that I probably wouldn't have chosen to spend time with, but that I grew to really care about and understand in a fundamental way, both their sensibilities, but also them as people, as physical people, of working so closely with so many other people, that you become accustomed to people's manners and their actions and their smells, and that working in this tight-knit environment. And of course, so many working environments are like this, but I think there is something so unique about the fast food environment and this corporate sensibility, which is drilled into all of the employees, that make you think you are part and joining kind of a family that is all working together, but really it is all profit driven, and there is this emphasis on maintaining a corporate image and corporate standards. But really, why people regularly like going into these fast food restaurants is for the individuals that work there and forming connections with them over time. And of course, there's that kind of Andy Warhol thing where he said that the most beautiful thing in Tokyo is McDonald's. The most beautiful thing in Paris is McDonald's. And that there's this kind of standardization of the fast food industry, that you could go into any outlet and receive the exact same experience. But I think in communities, what people really value is the individual stamp that is put upon that restaurant and the spin that is given to it. And we see that in so many of the characters in this story that add their own touches to this fast food restaurant, that the manager BJ has a special recipe for their cornbread for the Thanksgiving meal, and which is her own tightly guarded secret, although we do eventually find out what's really in that cornbread. And there is Hai's cousin Sony, who creates these little what he calls paper penguins that he puts on all of the tables, and we see over time how there are different members of the community, both families but also drug addicts, that will regularly go into this establishment. But then there are also people from the outside who don't often visit it, and who just sort of happen upon this restaurant and stumble in, and then treat the employees and their individuality with scorn and contempt. And there's a meat preparer, Wayne, who receives racism, and we see that the impact that has upon him and the other employees at the restaurant, who kind of passively take this because it's coming from a customer, and you're trained that you can't argue with the customer. And so I think there is something so unique about this environment. And what I so appreciate about this novel is how Vuong gives dignity to the lives of the individuals that are so hardworking in this restaurant, and the connections they form with each other over time, despite the working under this corporate ethos. And sometimes the regional manager will come into the establishment and he'll just be very dismissive about their practices, and call BJ by her real name rather than the name that she has chosen for herself, and will very casually fire an employee, and so not value these individuals in the way that they are able to with each other, working with each other over a long period of time. And how he captures the dignity of their experience. It reminds me also of this recent Wim Wenders film called Perfect Days. And it's such a lovely film. It's just following the ordinary life of a man in Japan who's cleaning public toilets, and just following him throughout the day as he goes about his work, taking real pride in it, and the odd encounters he has with other people. But there are issues going on in his life which are unresolved, and which are kind of simmering underneath, and how it explores that I think is so beautiful. And Ocean Vuong does this in the novel, as well as really paying tribute to the lives of these characters, which to some of these characters may feel really over the top. But when you work in a fast food establishment, you will meet so many quirky characters that work there, of primarily kind of the young and the old, and meeting on this level plane where everyone is part of a mechanism in a machine. And I definitely found that working myself in fast food, and that I really fell into this work, even though it's low paid work. It's really grueling, tough work where you're on your feet all day preparing food. And I was a maintenance man, so I had to change the fryer vats, which was really disgusting, getting these big blocks of these big white blocks that then melt down into the fryers, and having to delivery days when massive boxes of mass-produced frozen food. You had to carry them into the freezer, and you went from the extreme heat to the kitchen to the extreme cold of the freezer, and that is really exhausting. There's so much about this job that is exhausting and not good, but at the same time, I kind of settled into this work as and felt really comfortable in it, and developed this nice routine where I was still working in fast food immediately after I graduated from college as well. And part of me felt like, well, I could just continue on doing this, working really hard during the day, during my shifts, and then I go home and I spend all my time just laying around reading, and that felt to me like a really peaceful, nice routine. And but of course, I did want to aspire and go on to other things as well. But part of me thinks back on that time and that I could have had an entirely other life that is all about this. And I feel like that's what Ocean Vuong gives in this novel, a glimpse of that this is the life for so many people. They go to their jobs, they work really hard, and then they go home and they appreciate the time that they have off with their family and friends and loved ones. And for Hai himself, that he loves reading. He's an aspiring writer, and so he'll go back to Gratsina, and he'll spend so much time reading Dostoevsky, reading the brothers Karamazov, and if you know that story, there are surprising parallels you can see between Dostoevsky's book and this novel, and how in the very beginning of the novel, it's described how there's a Virginia Woolf book, which then someone is reading, and then it falls beneath the bleachers of the local sports competition place, the fields where it is. Why can't I think of the name of it? But yeah, the kind of local high school fields, and this copy of the Virginia Woolf book falls beneath the bleachers and then is just kind of moldering away over time, and how he appreciates reading so much, and is reading this old copy of the novel that's literally disintegrating as he's turning the pages, because he just found it belonged to Gratsina's late husband, and he had a big book collection, and but books that have been just kind of stored in a way that they are just kind of disintegrating over time, and so following his story, and how there isn't too much, pushing the plot forward in this novel, that these characters don't really change all that much over time. There are things which happen to them and which occur in their lives, and any change which occurs is very slow and gradual over time, but just staying in their experience and following their connections over time, I found to be so meaningful and poignant and powerful. And there's an incredibly striking scene in this novel where Hai and a number of other employees from the fast food establishment, they go to a slaughterhouse to assist in slaughtering pigs, because they're told that they could get a lot more money, a big, substantial more hourly rate than they get at the fast food establishment by going to this. And we see the horrors of a slaughterhouse, and then the cruel irony that they don't even get the compensation that they were expecting after experiencing all the horrors of this, and facing the real bleak reality of that scene felt so true to life, and really powerful, and also a central image that goes throughout this novel of that. Also recently, there is a pizza restaurant that's opened nearby to this fast food restaurant, and that this was started by a family that just want to make good and create their own establishment, but that barely has any customers ever. And so we just see glimpses of this over time, how he notices that this pizza restaurant remains almost completely empty, and the sadness of that, and how the fast food restaurant, they introduce kind of a really makeshift and not very good pizza to their menu, and this presents a competition with this local pizza restaurant that is kind of doomed to failure because they can't compete with this large corporate entity which has moved in. And this also kind of represents the dissolution of the American dream, how difficult and unattainable it is for so many ordinary citizens and workers. And so the way that the novel represents this experience and shows it in such a striking way, I think is so powerful and so well done. And yeah, there are so many moments I remember from High's relationship with Grazina and the how their connection forms and where it goes in this story, I thought was incredibly moving. Now, I was slightly disappointed by the end of this novel, and I'm not going to give any spoilers, but the way he wraps it up did feel like kind of an odd choice to me. I kind of wish that the ending had mirrored the beginning in a way, in the style of its writing, but instead he does something a bit different with it. And so I'd be really interested to know if you've read this book, how you found the ending and what you thought about that and what is told and what is not told in the ending. But also, yeah, I'd love to know your impressions and thoughts about this novel in general and what you think about it. And if you've ever worked in fast food and if you also found the how that was represented in this novel true to life, and yeah, and what you think about this novel in general, because I think it is such a striking and powerful one. Now, I did read a review by the author Tom Crew recently, who wrote this great debut novel, The New Life. And Tom Crew, in that really searing review of this novel, he calls this book one of the I think like one of the most arduous reading experiences of his life, and he is just completely trashing this book in a way which I think is really unfair. I mean, he does make some points about the poetic language which is used in this book, but also in the way that in the tight-knit literary world that authors are constantly trying to bolster each other up, and but he is going completely the opposite way. But reading his review, I found it such an interesting, different way of considering this book, even though I largely disagreed with his opinion and point of view, and especially doesn't seem to recognize the way that this story is mirroring the experience of so many ordinary Americans, and I think you'd probably be quite discouraged to know that the style of the covers of these books they kind of mirror each other, don't they? And which I'm sure he wouldn't like the comparison at all. But yeah, I thought that was such an interesting counterpoint to my experience of reading this book. So I'll put a link to that below, as well as links to a number of different interviews with this author. I've loved listening to interviews with him because he speaks so passionately, so intelligently, and it feels like he is on the brink of tears at any moment, which I find incredibly endearing. And so I've loved listening to him speak about this novel and his own autobiographical inspiration for so many different aspects of this book, which I feel like it made it all the more striking and real to me. So yes, let me know if you have read this book and what you think about it, or if you're interested in reading it now. I would love to hear all about that and continue discussing it in the comments below. But I hope you're doing well and reading good things, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.